Can the deceased come back to live another life inside a different body? For many people, the concept of reincarnation is not new. We hear it in movies, fictional books, and religious texts. In many Asian and African countries, reincarnation, or at least the belief in it, is real. But it doesn't sit well with most people in the West, America and Europe. They see it as fantasy, or worse, another variation of the religious reward or punishment-based afterlife, where you get a good afterlife if you were a good person on Earth, and a bad afterlife for living a bad life. However, in the latter half of the 20th century, there was a renewed interest in the concept of reincarnation, championed by Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. Since then, over 3,000 cases of children born with precise knowledge of a past life have been discovered. With such compelling evidence, some skeptics have had to reevaluate their position on the matter. Is reincarnation real? Do people die only to return for round 2 of life in another body? If it does happen, how does the deceased choose in which body to return? How many times can a person be reincarnated? Can a person be reincarnated into 2 different people at the same time? At 38, Ian Stevenson became the chair of psychiatry at the University of Virginia. He had always been fascinated with the paranormal, and when he resumed his office in Charlottesville, he started to take his fascination more seriously. Naturally, the idea of the head of the college's mental health program diving into reincarnation and studying apparitions was uncomfortable. But in 1968, Chester Carlson, the inventor of the Xerox copying process, died of a heart attack and left $1 million to the University of Virginia. Carlson had taken an interest in Stevenson's work before he died. His only condition for the university receiving the money was that the money would be used to fund Stevenson's research into the paranormal. So it began. Stevenson could devote himself full-time to the study of reincarnation. In a few years, his discoveries would be so compelling that he would receive high praises, comparing him to the likes of Darwin and Galileo. Ian Stevenson's research mainly studied children's memories of previous lives, which he called the previous personality. One of his studies centers on a toddler named Thusitha in Sri Lanka. One day, the toddler overheard her mother mentioning Kataragama, a town the girl had never been to. She told her mother that she drowned there when her mentally challenged brother pushed her inside a river, and that she had a bald father named Harith, who sold flowers in a market near the Buddhist stupa. She lived in a house with a glass window on the roof, where dogs in the backyard were tied up and fed meat. The house was beside a big Hindu temple, where people smashed coconuts on the ground outside. Stevenson's investigation confirmed that there was indeed a flower vendor in the town in question whose daughter had drowned in the river while she played with her mentally challenged brother, who lived in a house where the neighbors threw meat to dogs tied up in their backyard. The house was adjacent to a temple where devotees smashed coconuts on the ground in a religious ritual. Some of the girl's statements were not accurate. For example, the dead girl's father was not bald, but her grandfather and uncle were. And his name was not Harith. The dead girl's cousin was. But 90% of her statements were accurate. Both families had never met. They had no common acquaintances, friends, or co-workers, so they could not have gotten those details from each other. Stevenson documented about 3,000 similar cases throughout his career. Sometimes, he could identify supposed family members from the children's former lives based on only the children's statements. Some cases were stronger than others, but they all offered compelling facts that could not be explained rationally. In 1997, Stevenson published what would be his magnum opus, a 2,268-page 2-volume work titled Reincarnation and Biology. 225 of the cases Stevenson reported in his book were about children who remembered past lives and also had physical anomalies that matched those previous lives, usually relating to how they died. These physical anomalies were often so rare that Stevenson could not find a single medical publication of another case. One of them was a Turkish boy whose face was congenially underdeveloped on the right side. He recalled the past life of a man who died from a shotgun blast at point-blank range. Another boy in Thailand had a small, round, puckered birthmark at the back of his head and a larger, odd birthmark at the front of his head, resembling the entry and exit points of a bullet. Stevenson confirmed that the man in the boy's statements died after being shot in the head with a rifle. There was also the Burmese girl, born without her lower right leg, who recalled the past life of a girl who had been run over by a train. The statements were often verified through autopsy reports and accounts of family members who had never met the subjects. Does this mean all children with very peculiar birthmarks or deformities have lived a past life? Not necessarily. Stevenson believed that the cases of reincarnation are very rare. Even in India, where reincarnation is not a unique occurrence, only about 1 in 500 children recall past lives. He did find several patterns in the cases he recorded. He discovered that most children only experienced these memories within a brief time frame, usually between the ages of 2 and 5. Some of them, like the Sri Lankan girl, only remembered the details of the past life when something happened in the current one to trigger the memories. So it was mainly pointless to interview these toddlers about these past lives. The exciting part of Stevenson's research is that, as he noted, the children's statements were falsifiable. If the adults around them recorded their statements, researchers like himself could investigate them and verify if they were true. And they were mostly accurate. If these accounts are true, why do these people choose to come back to life? What does this tell us about consciousness? Contemporary research into children's memories of past lives has led to the conclusion that most times, the children's reported lives often ended prematurely or unnaturally, usually involving violence, terrible illness, suicide, or an accident. Could they have been reborn to complete their prematurely ended lives? After Stevenson died in 2007, many researchers took up the task of discovering the truth behind reincarnation. Modern researchers scrupulously verified the statements of their subjects to eliminate the possibility that they got their information through more mundane ways, or they were fantasizing, or their parents were reading meanings into otherwise meaningless things their children were saying, based on their own experiences. The researchers sometimes gave the children recognition tests. They could show them pictures of people and ask them to pick which one relates to their previous lives, or photographs of houses to pick which one of their previous personalities had lived in them. One of the modern researchers in reincarnation is Jim Tucker, a professor of psychiatry and neurobehavioral science at the University of Virginia. In the 2016 May and June issue of Explore, he published a case report detailing his study of a boy named James Leninger. James was born on April 10, 1998. When he was 22 months old, he visited the Cavanaugh Flight Museum with his father, and he was noticeably excited about the planes, particularly the World War II exhibits. Over the next few months, James would show a strong passion for planes, and he would tell his parents some facts about planes that were surprising. He habitually said, "Airplane crash on fire," repeatedly, slamming his toy planes nose first into the family's coffee table. He also started having nightmares multiple times a week, screaming the words, "Airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out," while thrashing and kicking his legs up in the air. James revealed that his dreams were memories from past events. He had a previous personality who had been a soldier during World War II and had died when the Japanese had shot down his plane. He said the plane was a Corsair called Natoma, and he had flown the plane off a boat. When they asked him for the name of the little man in his memories, he said me, or James. He also mentioned that his friend Jack Larson had been with the little man. He identified a picture from a book called The Battle for Iwo Jima, 1945, as the place where his plane got shot down. His parents recorded his statements and started investigating. They found out that there was, indeed, a World War II soldier who had served on the USS Natoma Bay and had died during the Battle of Iwo Jima. James would draw battle scenes involving planes and sign them James III, because he said he was the third James. The little man in his memories was later discovered to be James M. Huston Jr. Huston was one of 8 pilots who were involved in the Iwo Jima operation, and he was the only one that was killed in the plane crash. Jack Larson was the pilot of the plane beside Huston's when it crashed. James gave other details, including the fact that Huston's father had been an alcoholic, which his sister later confirmed. James's parents eventually published a book about their research and experience with their son. Does this mean the boy experienced a life as James M. Huston before returning to life as James Leninger? The events James remembered happened 50 years before he was born. There had been no relationship between his family and that of Huston, and he recalled specific events that were recorded a long time before the previous personality was established. Tucker believes the parents had no motive to create this story for financial gains or fame, and the possibility that his museum visits triggered his imagination is low, because a museum is not likely to be set up in such a way that would trigger such violent reactions in a child. Maybe he could have had a few bad dreams, but not to the extent of displaying what appeared to be post-traumatic play, Tucker noted. He believed that James's behaviors appear very similar to those that children who have experienced trauma in their current lives display. There was also no evidence that James acquired his knowledge through normal means or from his parents. The only explanation of James's experience that holds water is that he had a connection with a life from the past. What is the connection between the brain and reincarnation? Scientists like Tucker believe that the consciousness is not entirely dependent on a person's physical brain. It can continue long after death and attach itself to another person. If that is the case, what factors influence this attachment? Do things like culture, race, sex, or religion affect reincarnation?